So I'm Sarah Gower. My pronouns are she, her. I'm originally from north central Pennsylvania, a small city called Williamsport, home of Little League Baseball. It's the only thing it's known for. Um, my core year is 2021. I am currently at Kip Legacy High School as the ninth grade composition teacher. What I go by in the classroom really varies. For the most part, it's Mrs. Gower, sometimes Mrs. G, sometimes Hey Lady, sometimes Sarah. I have a couple of students who like to yell best friend in the hall, so depends on the day. Why did I join TFA originally? A lot of my undergrad work, I was a secondary education major, and part of the program, even though it was centered around social studies, we had to have so much of other types of courses, but my required reading for one of my earliest classes was Other People's Children, which is an incredible read about like culturally relevant teaching, especially coming from a college that is not, I wouldn't even say PWI, like, because that doesn't even explain how white this college, I'm talking Podunk, Pennsylvania, hillbilly area. So to have a professor who made sure that we were exposed to this early on was huge. When I got into teaching in general, my focus was a lot on poverty because of my own experiences growing up and being involved in things like Head Start, like on councils and stuff for that. But then when I was taking classes, I took my first culturally and linguistic diverse learners class, and we also read Savage Inequalities. And that's when I was like, this is so much a bigger picture than just poverty. Like there is like how much education is in trouble, especially in terms of equity, and then just like my love for social studies and economics and how that kind of came together. So when I was looking for options as I was getting closer to graduation, I got an advertisement, for lack of a better word, for Teach for America, and that was not necessarily a choice because I know that's kind of a route that a lot of people who aren't teachers take, but I really wanted to join other people who also wanted to fight for equitable education, who was not just there to be in the classroom, but was just like the bigger picture. So my goals for my work here, they kind of, here in Kansas City, it really aligns with what our school does and what just about every school in Kansas City wants to do, which is the literacy, right? And I know for Teach for America, that's also a big push, is that focus on literacy, which of course is so important, especially in trying to disrupt the school to prison pipeline. We know that statistically that literacy rates that they correlate with an ability to, or lower graduation rates, and then we of course know what happens when we have pockets of areas with such low graduation rates. But for me personally, what I am really invested in addition to kind of, ticking off all those boxes, is civic and social engagement. My goal is that every student will graduate from Legacy High School registered to vote, knowing who the representatives are, having done some level of community involvement, and not because it's a requirement, but because they want to. It's issues that they personally care about and are vested in. So I don't have a thing that I love about my kids. I look at all of these kids very much the way I look at my own two children, in that I love their individual quirks and personalities. I mean, there is not a blanket thing that I can give to these kids because they are so different from each other. So like if I had to put something specific and something that I'm really kind of dreading about the end of the year coming is like, our fifth hour classes are also, we have lunch with them. And instead of kind of going off and doing their own thing and using their free time, I have a handful of girls who, as soon as that lunch bell rings, they pull up a chair at my desk. And we just talk about everything from what mom did to annoy them today, how they're getting their hair done next week, politics, and they love spilling tea, and I'm here. I'm here for it. Like the biggest accomplishment I've had is definitely just, like, still centered in the classroom, And that would be the progress that these kids had made writing. That is what this class is. It's composition. I've taken AP Lang for 11th graders and made it what I call Baby Lang, and tried to gear it to 9th grade. The first writing piece they gave me was a credo statement, "This we believe," and that's what we have focused our whole year around is beliefs, ethics, things of that nature. And that credo statement, it was awful. Like, I took it, and as a first-year teacher and being new to this school and having a social studies and an English background, I was like, oh, what am I going to do with this? I was terrified. We are ending the year writing classical argumentation about really heavy-hitting topics. And we went from some really majorly incoherent papers, poor sentence structures. These kids spent so much time out of the classroom for the pandemic. Most of them did not have any writing course before this. KIPP, like many schools, has this focus on reading and literacy. And unfortunately, writing skills kind of got pushed to the wayside on that. So coming into it and trying to build these skills and having kids who are pounding out 6-paragraph, 3-page papers, some of them like it's nothing, has been a huge accomplishment. So it's hard to pinpoint like necessarily the biggest challenge. I've had challenges that are school related, and I've had challenges that are more personal. Pretty much immediately after relocating to Kansas City, I had dealt with renal failure, and I've been so blessed to have the team at KIPP who really supported and made sure that my year was not going to be impacted, that this wasn't going to start me off on a bad foot, and it really hasn't. And then also a couple core members who really saved the day when that had happened. But some more like in the classroom stuff has definitely been cultural. Coming from rural Pennsylvania, all of my previous, like as a student, my experience in the classroom has been with white, rural, middle-class students. So yeah, being used to like teaching styles that were the norm in a totally different like school atmosphere, and then trying to acclimate to the way that urban schools tend to be structured, which is a little, I guess, more structured. Trying to make that kind of transition has definitely been hard. An impact that I've made on students or in the community, I think I said that for good. It was really kind of hard for me, and I'm not gonna lie, I like thought about this during the night. I'm like, what do you? Because I don't like to talk about an impact necessarily that I made, because all I am doing is providing tools and an atmosphere in this classroom and a safe space for students to make an impact. And they're the ones who are making an impact on their own education. It's how they're receiving what I'm giving them is where the impact really is. So I don't like, that's just not really the impact that I made isn't really a way that I'm comfortable kind of phrasing it, but what's come to mind more specifically is, so we have our curriculum, and within this curriculum, our summative assessment for our first argumentative unit was based around an article from the Parkland shooting. And I mentioned it to some students, and the amount of students who just had no idea about Parkland, I was like, wow, that's interesting. But then when I explained it, the immediate feedback I got was jokes about how this demographic is not one that has to worry about school shooters. And it was kind of a joke to them about how that's something that happens in white schools, so like we don't have to. And what I took away from that was not so much that, like the jokes, but was realizing that article was not culturally relevant to these children. They did not care. So I needed to find something else that I thought they would actually respond to. So after kind of doing some searching and really just existing, wondering what we're going to do for this summative assessment, I got a notification from the Kansas City Star that they were doing a panel that was filmed on Zoom regarding violence in Kansas City, in Missouri, and how it was related to school systems. And I was like, holy crap, there it is. That's what we're using. And that was kind of the focus of our summative assessment, was then not only violence that is experienced in the community that many of the students that I have in this classroom have themselves been a part of, have witnessed, they know people. So they were immediately kind of invested in this, but when they're watching this interview between somebody who is from Kansas City, somebody from St. Louis, and somebody from the Ozarks, and they're talking about, community violence from Kansas City and St. Louis, and in the Ozarks, this lady is talking about suicide, self-inflicted violence. And they're just kind of blown away that this is such an issue. But then when they hear that Kansas City only receives like 4% of school funding from the state, they're immediately angry, which is a response that I want them to have. And they're talking about how, what solutions there are, such as increased counselors, increased school funding. So we've explored the history everywhere from Missouri as a slave state, and with the Great Migration bringing in additional populations, to the history of 18th Vine, to the impact of Wayne Minor being destroyed, and just that whole timeline. So we took from something that I knew was going to be they were going to be uninvested in, to bringing in something that they themselves had their own personal experiences with and want to talk about, want to have that safe space to be able to voice their concerns. But then with our latest unit, circled around the justice system, and we had read Just Mercy, there was some talk in there about, we were talking about, I don't know if it was, trying to remember how it was brought up, but it was something else that we had read or watched regarding, it was an interview with women in an Oklahoma prison. And they talked about recidivism rates with education. So we stopped and paused and had a discussion on, let's bring it back to that first paper we did. If they are purposely underfunding schools in Kansas City, and education is the key to, and graduation is the key to not ending up in situations, whether you deserve it or not, because there was a lot of questions about who deserves to be on, because it was circled around death row because of Just Mercy. But seeing that relationship between their very first paper and the violence that it's experienced, the lack of funding, and then prison and education. And they were piecing that together all the way from October. That was that moment. And like I said before, it's not just the writing, it's the anger. And I want that, because I want them to want to then, as they get the tools to be, I want them to go to City Hall. I've had them write letters to our representatives here about these issues and what their solutions are based on research. And I want that to increase, that civic engagement to increase. The advice I would give to an incoming Corps member would be that you have to really want this. And I'm not speaking on anybody's experience in general, but this is hard. And you might not get I was blessed to be put into a school where their values align with mine. And not every school is going to be like that. So you have to really want this, and you have to be kind of strong with your convictions. And that, for me, I've always been all about disrupting the status quo. And if that's something that you want to do, especially as an anti-racist educator, you have to be willing then to, when you step into that role as an educator, you have to be willing to disrupt the status quo. and not just kind of sit there and say, yeah, I'm going to do whatever you tell me to because you're my boss. Yeah, this is your job, but you came in as an anti-racist educator, and that's the difference between being not racist and anti-racist. Is if you're not willing to say, no, this isn't right, this isn't equitable, then you're failing as an anti-racist educator. So just kind of be sure that this is what you want to do and be strong in your convictions.